My name is Emily Carter, and for most of my life, I believed there was one person in this world who would never hurt me. Her name was Jessica. We met when we were 12 years old, sitting on the same school bus in a small town in Ohio. I remember that day clearly because I was crying. My parents had just separated, and I was trying so hard not to let anyone notice. Jessica sat beside me without asking. She handed me half of her peanut butter sandwich and said, "You look like you need a friend." I laughed through my tears. That was the beginning. For the next 20 years, Jessica wasn't just my best friend. She was family. We went through everything together. High school dances, college applications, first jobs, broken hearts, late-night phone calls, cheap apartments, bad dates, birthday parties. When I got engaged, she was the first person I called. When her mother died, I drove 6 hours through the night just to sit beside her. I never kept score. That's the thing about real friendship. You don't count what you give. You just give. After college, I started a small event planning business called Carter & Company Events. It wasn't glamorous in the beginning. My office was a tiny room above a coffee shop. Sometimes I couldn't afford lunch. Sometimes I worked 16 hours a day, but slowly, things changed. I got bigger clients, then corporate clients, then weddings for wealthy families. By the time I was 32, my little business had become something I was proud of. And Jessica was there through all of it. At least that's what I thought. One evening, she came to my apartment carrying a bottle of wine. She sat across from me and said, "Emily, I want to do something with you." I smiled. "What?" She leaned forward. "I've been thinking about starting a luxury wedding division." I listened. She had ideas, a lot of them. She wanted to handle celebrity weddings, high-end corporate events, destination weddings. And honestly, I loved the idea. I told her, "Let's do it together." She smiled. That smile meant everything to me. We spent months planning. I put most of the money into the project. Jessica promised she would handle marketing, vendors, and client relationships. I trusted her completely. I even gave her access to our financial accounts. That was my first mistake, but I didn't know it yet. For the first 6 months, everything went perfectly. We landed a huge client, then another. Our company revenue doubled. Jessica started wearing expensive clothes. She bought a new car. She moved into a beautiful apartment downtown. I was happy for her. One night I joked, "Girl, you're becoming too fancy for me." She laughed. "You're the reason I'm here." I believed her. Then something changed. It started with little things. Jessica stopped answering my calls. She began having private meetings with clients. She told me she was building relationships. I didn't question her. Then one afternoon, I received an email from a client I'd personally brought into the company. The email said, "Emily, I hope there are no hard feelings." Jessica explained everything to me. I stared at the screen. I had no idea what she was talking about. I called Jessica. She didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. That evening, she finally came to my apartment. I asked her what was happening. She looked at me calmly, too calmly. Then she said something I will never forget. "Emily, you're emotional. I'm thinking about the future." I stared at her. "What does that mean?" She sighed. "I think the company would be better without you." For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. I actually laughed because I thought she was joking. Then she placed a folder on my table. Inside were documents, new company papers, new contracts, new bank information, and her name was listed as the primary owner of the new company. I looked at her. "Jessica, what is this?" She wouldn't look me in the eyes. "You invested money," she said, "but I built the relationships." I felt my stomach drop. "What are you saying?" She finally looked at me. "I've been talking to the clients." My voice became quiet. "You've been stealing my clients?" She shook her head. "I'm not stealing anything. I'm taking what I helped build." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was the same woman who had held me while I cried after my parents' divorce. The same woman whose mother's funeral I had attended. The same woman who knew every secret I had. And now she was sitting in front of me like I was a business obstacle. I asked her one question. "Why didn't you just talk to me?" She looked away. "Because I knew you wouldn't agree." That sentence broke something inside me, not because she wanted success, not because she wanted money, but because she had already decided that my friendship wasn't worth protecting. I spent that night going through every financial statement, and that's when I discovered something much worse. There were transfers, large transfers. Money had been moved from our business account into another account, an account I didn't recognize. My hands started shaking. The total was more than $180,000. I called Jessica again. This time she answered. I asked, "Where did the money go?" Silence. Then she said, "Emily, don't make this ugly." I whispered, "You stole from me." She replied, "No, I took what I deserved." I sat on the floor. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just stared at the wall. Because suddenly I realized something terrifying. I had spent 20 years believing I knew my best friend, but maybe I had only known the person she wanted me to see. The next morning, I contacted a lawyer. And that's when I discovered the truth. Jessica hadn't acted alone. Someone had been helping her. Someone who knew exactly how my company worked. Someone who had access to information only a very small number of people knew. And when my lawyer showed me the name, I couldn't breathe. Because it was someone I trusted almost as much as Jessica. And that was the moment my life completely changed. But what happened next was only the beginning. The name on the document was Michael Carter, my younger brother. I stared at the page for what felt like an hour. "That's impossible," I said. My lawyer, Daniel, didn't say anything. He simply pushed another document toward me. There were emails, bank records, signed agreements, messages between Jessica and Michael. They had been planning everything for months. My brother had given Jessica information about my company's finances. Jessica had used that information to move clients away from me. Together, they had created a competing business. I called Michael. He answered like nothing had happened. "Hey, Em," I asked, "did you help Jessica?" There was a long silence. Then he said, "Who told you?" I closed my eyes. That was enough. "You did," he sighed. "Emily, listens, no." My voice was shaking. "Just tell me why." He didn't apologize. Instead, he said, "You were never going to share the company with me anyway." I couldn't believe it. "You weren't part of the company. You could have made me part of it." I laughed bitterly. "So you helped my best friend steal from me because you wanted a piece?" He said, "Jessica offered me a position." There it was. Money, again, always money. I ended the call. Over the next few weeks, everything collapsed. Clients disappeared. Employees quit. The bank froze several accounts. I had legal bills, business debts. And worst of all, people believed Jessica's version of the story. She told everyone that I had mismanaged the company. She said I was unstable. She said she had saved the business. Some people believed her. I lost almost everything. My apartment, my car, my company, my confidence. There were mornings when I couldn't get out of bed. I'd stare at the ceiling and wonder how a person could go from having everything to having almost nothing. But there was one thing Jessica couldn't take, my ability to start over. I found a small job managing events for a hotel. It wasn't what I wanted, but it paid my bills. Every night I went home exhausted, and slowly I started rebuilding. One client at a time, one relationship at a time, $1 at a time. 3 years passed, then 5. By the 5th year, I had built a new company. Not huge, not famous, but honest. I called it Emily Rose Events. I kept the company small. I hired people I trusted. And I never gave anyone complete control over my finances again. I also stopped talking about Jessica. I didn't hate her anymore. At least I thought I didn't. Then, 7 years after the betrayal, I received a phone call. It was from a number I didn't recognize. I answered. A woman's voice said, "Emily?" "Yes." There was silence. Then I heard something I hadn't heard in years. "It's Jessica." My heart stopped. I almost hung up, but I didn't. She whispered, "I need your help." I looked out my office window. The woman who had destroyed my life was asking me for help, and I had never felt more powerful. Because for the first time she needed me, and I had a choice. I could finally get revenge, or I could become the kind of person she never believed I could be. And I had no idea yet which choice would change both of our lives. Jessica was crying. Not the kind of crying people do when they want sympathy. This was different. Her voice was broken. I don't know who else to call. I leaned back in my chair. For years, I'd imagined this moment. I'd imagined Jessica calling me and begging for help. In those fantasies, I'd laugh. I'd remind her of everything she had done. I'd tell her she deserved whatever was happening. But now that it was actually happening, I couldn't say any of those things. I simply asked, "What happened?" She took a shaky breath. "My daughter, Lily, is sick." Everything inside me went quiet. I knew Lily. She had been 7 years old when Jessica betrayed me. I'd bought her birthday presents. I remembered teaching her how to ride a bicycle. She used to call me Aunt Emily. I asked, "What kind of sick?" Jessica started crying harder. "She needs a heart transplant." I closed my eyes. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Jessica continued. "The doctors say she doesn't have much time." I didn't know what to say. Then she whispered, "And I'm not asking you for money." I almost laughed. "Then why are you calling me?" "Because the hospital needs someone to organize a fundraising campaign. Someone who knows how to handle corporate donors and charity events." She paused. "Emily, you're the best person I know at that." I stared at my desk. Those words should have felt good. Instead, they hurt. Because I remembered how she had once told me that my work wasn't good enough. Now she was calling me the best. I asked, "How much does Lily need?" "About $400,000. I sat back. 400,000, that was more money than I had in my business account. Jessica said, "I've sold my house." "What?" "Everything, the car, jewelry, savings, everything." Her voice cracked. "I would sell my life if it would save her." That sentence stayed with me. Because for the first time, I saw Jessica differently. Not as the woman who betrayed me, not as my former best friend, but as a mother who was terrified of losing her child. I asked her to send me the medical information. She did. I spent the next 2 days researching everything. I contacted hospitals, charities, donors, nonprofit organizations. I reached out to people I hadn't spoken to in years. And slowly, something incredible happened. People responded. A local business offered a venue. A restaurant offered food. A photographer donated his services. A famous singer agreed to perform for free. Within 3 weeks, we had organized a charity event. But there was one problem. Jessica and I hadn't spoken face to face. Not once. The night before the event, she came to my office. She stood at the door. She looked completely different. Older, tired, broken. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "You look happy." I smiled faintly. "I am," she nodded. "I'm glad." I wanted to ask her why. Why did she destroy me? Why did she lie? Why did she choose money over our friendship? But I didn't. Instead, I asked, "How is Lily?" Jessica started crying. "She's scared." I walked toward her. For a moment, I almost hugged her. Then I stopped. There were still too many wounds between us. Jessica understood. She nodded. "I know." We sat down, and for the first time in 7 years, we talked. She told me everything. After the betrayal, her new company had initially been successful, very successful, but she became obsessed with money. She expanded too quickly, borrowed too much, took risks she couldn't afford. Then the economy changed. The business collapsed. Michael left her. Her marriage ended. Her friends disappeared. She lost almost everything. But the hardest part wasn't losing money. It was realizing that the people she had sacrificed her friendships for. She looked at me. I thought money would make me safe. I didn't answer. She continued. But when Lily got sick, I realized I had spent years building a life that meant nothing. Tears rolled down her face. "I thought you were weak because you cared about people." She looked down. I was wrong. I finally asked the question I'd carried for 7 years. "Why did you do it?" She stared at me. "I was jealous." I didn't expect that. She continued. "You had something I didn't." "What?" "Peace." She wiped her tears. "You could walk into a room and people trusted you. Employees loved you. Clients respected you. Your family looked at you like you were special." She laughed sadly. "I thought money could buy what you had naturally." I didn't know how to respond. Then she said something that broke my heart. "I'm sorry, Emily. Not I'm sorry if I hurt you. Not I'm sorry things happened. Just I'm sorry." I looked at her. And for the first time, I believed her. The charity event was a success. People donated more than we expected. By midnight, we'd raised almost $300,000, but Lily still needed more. We were short by about $100,000. Jessica sat in her car outside the hospital parking lot. She called me. "I don't think we're going to make it." I looked at my business account. I had enough money, not comfortably, but enough. I could make the donation. The problem was that money was my emergency savings. Money I'd spent years rebuilding. I stared at the number. Then I remembered being broke. I remembered sleeping on a friend's couch. I remembered losing my company. I remembered Jessica. And then I remembered Lily, a little girl who had never betrayed me. I transferred the money, the full amount. Jessica called me 10 minutes later. She was sobbing. "Emily, what did you do?" I said. "I saved a child." She couldn't speak. I continued, "But don't misunderstand me." She went silent. "I haven't forgotten what you did. I know, and I don't know if we'll ever be friends again. I know, but Lily shouldn't have to pay for our mistakes." There was silence. Then Jessica whispered, "Thank you." I hung up. I thought that was the end. It wasn't, because the next morning, the doctor called Jessica. Lily had been approved for the transplant, but there was another problem. The surgery needed to happen immediately, and something unexpected was about to happen, something that would force me to decide whether forgiveness was truly possible. Lily's surgery was scheduled for the following morning. Jessica barely slept. I stayed at the hospital for hours. Not because I wanted to be Jessica's friend again. I stayed because Lily was alone. At 4 a.m, Jessica walked into the waiting room. She sat beside me. Neither of us spoke. After a while, she said, "Do you remember the summer we turned 17? I smiled. "You mean when we got arrested for sneaking into the school swimming pool?" She laughed. For the first time in years, I heard the old Jessica, the girl I remembered. She said, "We were stupid." "We were. You jumped the fence first." "No, you did." We both laughed. Then the laughter disappeared. Jessica looked at me. "I miss you." I didn't answer. She continued, "I know I don't have the right to say that." I looked at her. "You lost that right a long time ago." She nodded. "I know." A nurse came through the doors. "Family of Lily Morgan?" Jessica immediately stood. The nurse smiled. She made it through the first stage. Jessica covered her mouth. She started crying. I held her hand. For a moment, there was no past, no betrayal, just two women waiting for a child to survive. The surgery lasted almost 8 hours. Finally, the surgeon came out. "She's stable." Jessica collapsed into my arms. She cried against my shoulder. "Thank you," I whispered. "She's the one who did the hard part." For the next several days, Lily slowly recovered. When she finally opened her eyes, she looked at me. "Aunt Emily?" My heart broke. She remembered me. I smiled. "Hey, sweetheart," she whispered. "Mom said you saved me." I looked at Jessica. Jessica was crying. I said, "Your mom did everything she could." Lily smiled. "You're both here." That sentence changed something inside me. Because children don't understand adult revenge. They don't care who stole money. They don't care who betrayed whom. They only understand who stayed. A few weeks later, Lily went home. Jessica and I stopped talking regularly. But something had changed. There was no friendship, not yet, just peace. Then one afternoon, Jessica called me. She said, "I found something." "What?" "Something about the money." My heart sank. "What do you mean?" She told me that while reviewing old company records, she discovered something disturbing. The $180,000 she had taken from my company wasn't all gone. Some of it had been transferred into an investment account, and that account had continued growing. There was now almost $420,000 sitting there. My money, my original money. Jessica said, "I want to return every dollar." I was stunned. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." "Jessica, you've already lost everything." She said, "I lost everything because I chose wrong." There was a long silence. Then she said, "This money belongs to you." She transferred the entire amount back to me, not $1 missing. I stared at my bank statement. $420,000. For 7 years, I had imagined revenge, and now revenge had arrived in a form I never expected. I could have taken the money and walked away. Instead, I called Jessica. Keep $100,000. She was shocked. What? Use it to start over. No. Yes. Emily, I can't take your money. You're not taking it. I paused. I'm giving it. She started crying. Why? I answered honestly. Because I don't want your daughter growing up believing that her mother's worst mistake is the only thing that defines her. Jessica couldn't speak. I continued, but the rest of the money is going to charity. What charity? A Children's Heart Foundation. There was silence. Then Jessica whispered, That's exactly what I would have done if I had been you. I smiled sadly. No, you're right. I am. I should have done it years ago. And that was the first time I realized something. Maybe forgiveness wasn't about pretending the betrayal never happened. Maybe forgiveness was about refusing to let someone else's cruelty turn you into someone you didn't want to become. But there was still one person from my past who hadn't apologized. Michael. And when he heard what Jessica and I had done, he came back. And this time, he wasn't asking for money. He was asking for forgiveness. Michael showed up at my office on a rainy Tuesday morning. I hadn't seen him in almost 7 years. When my assistant told me there was a man outside asking for me, I almost ignored it. Then she said his name. Michael Carter. My chest tightened. For a few seconds, I just stared at the floor. Part of me wanted to tell her to send him away. Another part of me wanted to know why he had come back. I finally said, Send him in. The door opened. Michael walked inside. He looked older. His hair was turning gray around the sides. His expensive clothes were gone. He was wearing a simple jacket that looked like it had seen better days. He stood there awkwardly. Hi, Em. I didn't answer. He looked around my office. You built all this again? I said, I did. He nodded. I heard about Lily. So? I heard you helped Jessica. Yes. He looked at me for a long moment. I don't understand you. I almost laughed. You don't have to. He sat down. Then he said something I never expected. I came to apologize. I leaned back in my chair. For what? He swallowed. For everything. I waited. He continued. I was jealous of you too. I didn't say anything. You were always the successful one, he said. People respected you. Dad trusted you. Mom always talked about how responsible you were. I shook my head. Michael, you were my brother. You didn't have to compete with me. I know that now. His eyes filled with tears. I didn't know it then. He told me what happened after the company collapsed. Jessica had stopped speaking to him. The new company eventually failed. He lost his job. Then his marriage fell apart. For years, he blamed everyone else. Eventually, he realized the truth. I destroyed my own family for money, he said. I looked at him. Why now? He wiped his eyes. Because I saw what you did for Jessica. I frowned. What does that have to do with you? Everything. He leaned forward. You had every reason to hate her. He paused. But you still saved her daughter. His voice broke. And I realized I had spent 7 years waiting for someone else to forgive me when I had never forgiven myself. I looked out the window. Rain was running down the glass. I remembered being 20 years old, sitting beside Michael at our parents' kitchen table. We used to fight over stupid things. Who got the last piece of pie? Who had to wash the dishes? Who got to use the car? Nothing serious, just siblings being siblings. Then money had entered our lives. And somehow everything changed. I looked back at him. I can't forget what you did. I know. You helped destroy something I worked years to build. I know. You betrayed your own sister. His eyes filled with tears. I know. I took a deep breath, but I'm tired of carrying it. He looked at me. What does that mean? It means I forgive you. He started crying. I didn't hug him, not immediately. Forgiveness doesn't erase boundaries. It doesn't mean trust comes back overnight. It simply means I was done letting the past control my future. Michael stood. He walked toward me, then he stopped. Can I hug you? I nodded. He hugged me. And for the first time in 7 years, I hugged my brother. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't like the old days, but it was a beginning. A few months later, something unexpected happened. Michael started volunteering at the Children's Heart Foundation where I had donated the money. He worked there every Saturday. He helped families fill out paperwork. He drove patients to appointments. He never asked for recognition, never posted about it, never told anyone what he had done. One afternoon, I asked him why. He said, "I spent years taking from people." He smiled sadly. "Now I want to spend the rest of my life giving something back." That sentence stayed with me. Meanwhile, Jessica had started over too. She opened a small consulting business. Nothing like the company we once had. No fancy office, no luxury cars, just a little room above a bakery. She worked honestly, slowly, carefully. And every year she donated part of her profits to the Heart Foundation. One evening, she invited me to dinner. I almost said no, but I went. We sat at a small restaurant near the river. For the first 20 minutes, we talked about ordinary things. Work, Lily, the weather. Then Jessica put her fork down. "I need to ask you something." "What? Do you think we'll ever be friends again?" I looked at her. The honest answer was complicated. "I don't know." She nodded. "I understand." I continued, "But I don't hate you." She smiled. "That's more than I deserve." "No," I shook my head. "It's what I deserve." She looked confused. I explained. "If I spent the rest of my life hating you, you'd still control part of my life." She looked down. "So what happens now?" I smiled. "We move forward." She reached across the table. I placed my hand over hers. Not because everything was fixed. Not because the past disappeared. But because sometimes two people can hurt each other deeply and still choose to become better human beings. Then Jessica told me something that changed everything. She had received an offer. A very large company wanted to buy her new business. The money would be enough for her to become wealthy again, but the company had a reputation for exploiting small businesses. They wanted Jessica to use the same aggressive methods that had destroyed our friendship years earlier. She asked me, "What should I do?" I looked at her. "You already know?" She nodded. "I do." She turned down the offer. Instead, she kept her small company. She wanted to build something she could be proud of. That night when I drove home, I realized something. 7 years earlier, Jessica had taken almost everything from me. Now, strangely enough, her betrayal had given me something I never had before. Perspective. I had learned that money could disappear. Businesses could fail. People could walk away. But the way we treat people stays with us. And just when I thought our story had finally reached its ending, Lily called me. She was crying. "Aunt Emily, Mom wants to tell you something." I heard Jessica's voice in the background. Then she came on the phone. "Emily," her voice sounded terrified. "What happened?" She took a deep breath. "I found the original documents from the old company." My heart stopped. "What documents?" "The ones from before I betrayed you." "What about them?" "There was something I never knew." She paused. "Your father had left something for you." I couldn't speak. "My father?" "Yes. And Michael found it too." I sat down. "What did he leave?" Jessica whispered, "A letter." And that letter contained the one truth about my family that I had never known. The next morning, I drove to my parents' old house. It had been sold years earlier, but Michael had kept several boxes of our father's belongings. He was waiting for me when I arrived. Jessica was there too. For a moment, the three of us stood silently in the driveway. 7 years ago, I would never have imagined that we'd be standing together again. Michael brought out an old wooden box. This was Dad's. I touched the lid. My father's handwriting was still visible on the side. "Emily?" My hands began shaking. I opened it. Inside were old photographs, my childhood drawings, a birthday card I'd made for him when I was 8, and one envelope. My name was written on it. I opened the letter. It said, "Emily, if you're reading this, then I'm probably not around to tell you what I should have told you years ago. I've watched you grow into someone who works hard, loves deeply, and gives people more chances than they deserve. But there's something I want you to understand. Never measure your worth by how much money you have. Money can buy comfort. It can buy a house. It can buy opportunities. But it cannot buy loyalty. It cannot buy love. And it cannot buy peace." I stopped reading. My eyes filled with tears. Michael looked away. I continued. "One day, someone you love may hurt you. When that happens, you will have two choices. You can become bitter, or you can become wiser. I hope you choose wisdom. I couldn't read anymore. I folded the letter against my chest. My father had died before Jessica betrayed me, before my company collapsed, before everything happened. And somehow, his words felt like they had been written for that exact moment. Michael started crying. I wish Dad was here. So do I. We stood there together. Three people who had once been connected by love, then separated by money, and somehow found their way back. Jessica walked toward me. I've been thinking about something, she said. What? The company. I looked at her. What about it? I want to help you build something bigger. I smiled. I don't need another company. I know, she took a breath, but I want us to build something different. What? A foundation. I stared at her. A foundation for families who are struggling financially because of medical emergencies. I looked at Michael. He smiled. I'll help. And that's how it began. Not with a huge investment. Not with wealthy investors. Not with some magical overnight success. Just three people who had made terrible mistakes trying to do something good with the lessons those mistakes had taught them. We called it the Carter Hope Foundation. Our first goal was simple. Help families who were facing medical bills and didn't know where to turn. We started small. One family, then another, then 10, then 50, and something beautiful happened. People started donating. Businesses started helping. Doctors volunteered. Local restaurants held fundraising nights. Ordinary people gave $20, $10, sometimes $5. One woman mailed us a handwritten note with a $3 check. She wrote, I don't have much, but I remember what it felt like to need help. I cried when I read it, because that was humanity, not money, not fame, not revenge, humanity. Years passed. Lily grew stronger. She eventually graduated from college. At her graduation ceremony, she walked across the stage and then ran straight toward Jessica and me. She hugged us both. Then she laughed. You two are still weird. We laughed. I looked at Jessica. She smiled. There were still scars between us. Some wounds never completely disappear. But they don't have to, because scars aren't always proof that something is broken. Sometimes they're proof that something survived. A few months later, Jessica and I sat together on a bench outside the foundation's office. She looked at me. Do you ever regret helping me? I thought about it. No, even after everything? Yes, she smiled. Why? I looked at the children playing across the street. Because if I had chosen revenge, Lily might not be here. Jessica started crying. I continued. I lost a friendship because of money. But I gained a lesson I will never forget. She wiped her eyes. What lesson? I smiled. That revenge feels powerful for a moment. I looked at her. But kindness can change a person's entire life. She nodded. And sometimes, I said, the best revenge isn't destroying the person who hurt you. I paused. It's becoming someone they can never destroy. Jessica took my hand. And for the first time, I realized something I'd never understood when I was younger. Forgiveness isn't saying what happened was okay. It wasn't okay. What Jessica did was wrong. What Michael did was wrong. The lies were wrong. The betrayal was real. The pain was real. But my life didn't have to end where their betrayal began. I had a choice, and so did they. We could spend our lives looking backward, or we could use what happened to help someone else. I chose the second. And maybe that's the real story. Not about revenge. Not about money. Not even about betrayal. It's about what we do after someone breaks our heart. Because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is refuse to become cruel just because someone was cruel to you. Sometimes you don't need to get even. Sometimes you just need to get free. And if there is one thing I learned from everything that happened, it's this. People may take your money. They may take your business. They may even break your trust. They cannot take away the person you choose to become. So if you're listening to my story tonight and someone has hurt you, I hope you remember that. Don't let their betrayal decide your future. Build again. Love again. Trust carefully. Set boundaries. And when you finally have the chance to hurt them back, ask yourself one question. Will this make me happier, or will it only make me more like them? I chose happiness. And honestly, that was the greatest revenge of all.